and that there was more symmetry that had been lost. And I thought I heard somebody say, ouch.
Sonoma County, a diverse county of over 1 million acres, is famed for its agriculture, industry, and recreation, boasting a booming economy and a unique lifestyle for its citizens. Described by the famed Luther Burbank as the chosen spot of all the earth, Sonoma County is the place to live, work, and play as we move into the 21st century. Led by the forward-looking philosophy of its governing bodies, Sonoma County's 340,000 residents are a harmonious, successful blend of ethnic and economic backgrounds. We invite you to take a closer look at Sonoma County in the 90s with your host, Rich McGlinchey.
How you doing, everybody? Welcome to this edition of Sonoma County in the 90s on our new set here in Post-Newsweek Cable Studios. We're going to be talking to our sheriff, Mark Eide, on this program. We've got a lot of questions to ask Mark. We're going to find out what's happening in law enforcement. But before we do, I want to call briefly your attention to the artwork on the walls. Now, these particular paintings happen to be by my lovely wife, Ellie. But we want to also mention the fact that in the future, if you would like to see your artwork displayed on the set, there'll be an announcement at the end of the program, so just check that and be sure that you see the name Teresa McManus, get in touch with her, and maybe we'll have your artwork on next time. Now, as I said, we're going to be talking to our friend Mark Eide. Hi, Mark. How you doing?
How are
Been quite a while.
It has been.
A year or so, I guess, huh?
Yeah, just about.
Yeah. How long now have you been in office now?
Just about 3 years.
Almost 3 years. Wow. Been a good 3 years too.
Yes, it has.
We haven't had any horrible furor we had for a while. 3 years, Mark. That means you have another year before you go out on the trail again. Is that right?
Actually, the end of this year starts the new campaign.
Right. Yeah. Right. Mark, you implemented a community-oriented policing program in Roseland. I think it was in 1991. Now, what is a community-oriented policing program?
Well, essentially, Rich, it's a non-traditional approach to law enforcement. And it's, as the name implies, it's community-oriented and gets the officers more involved in the community and the community more involved in the law enforcement or community wellness effort.
Mm-hmm. How is this community-oriented policing program different from conventional policing strategies that you use elsewhere?
I think you really need to look at historically what law enforcement has done over the years. If you go back, well, I started in the business 23 years ago, but even before that, law enforcement was really more part of a community, especially in rural areas where there were not a lot of population, and the officers in the area knew who the people were, and the people knew who their police officers were. Over the years, as increasing demands for law enforcement services, our response has been that we want the officer to come in to solve the problem and to get back and be available for the next call. So we've looked at how fast we can get officers from one call to the next. And we've mobilized officers, put them into cars, and I've kind of joked at times that during the wintertime, they ride around with the windows up and the heater on, and during the summertime with the windows up and the air conditioner on. But they've been somewhat separate and apart from the community. Yeah. So what we're doing now is trying to get the officers back involved in the community and actually enlisting the aid of the community and a variety of other governmental, community-based services to address the whole issue of community wellness. And what we found is a lot of the problems which we in law enforcement and I think the community have always looked at as law enforcement problems are really not. They're more societal problems, and law enforcement only plays a role in solving those problems.
Well, community policing, or oriented policing, as you discuss it, seems to me, from what you've just said thus far, is kind of a throwback to policing many years ago, the cop on the beat type of thing, is it?
Well, essentially it is. It is getting officers back into the community as they were and reassigning. The other thing that we have done is we have kind of rotated officers through assignments. Well, what we try to do in a community-oriented process is to have officers consistently assigned to one geographic area. So they get to know who the people are and the people get to know who the officers are. But we're also using new technology. We're not, it's not totally a throwback to law enforcement 40 years ago.
Oh, it's way advanced, some of that. What led you to believe that you've talked about a little bit of that right here, but what led you to believe ultimately that community-oriented policing is a better way to deliver law enforcement services?
Well, basically, we weren't being successful in what we were doing in our traditional approach. And in the past, when we had a problem, an officer would go, would deal with the immediate problem, and then as soon as the immediate problem was dealt with, he'd leave. And what we found is that we would come back to the same problem time after time after time. So we were dealing with the superficial part, but not really the root cause of the problem. And it was taking more and more time, and in doing some research and looking at other pilot projects, we found that when the officers actually spent some time and tried to address the root cause of the problem, that in the long run it was actually more efficient to do that. And the other thing is we just don't have the resources, so we really need to work with the community and empower the community to solve some of their own problems.
Yeah. You seem to, in this project, have targeted the Roseland area. Now, why did you select the Roseland area to implement the department, the initial experience, I guess I should say, with the community-oriented policing? COP, that stands for that.
COP. And actually in the Roseland area.
I just picked that up.
In the Roseland area, we have actually nicknamed that program RCOP for Roseland Community-Oriented Policing. But it actually encompasses the Roseland, Bellevue, and Wright areas of Sonoma County. And we selected that for a couple of reasons. One is that the community-oriented policing concept is much easier to implement in an area where there are high concentrations of residents. And the Roseland area was one of about 2 areas that the Sheriff's Department is responsible for that had that high concentration of people. They're basically a small town. And they were actually 1% of the geographic area that we had responsibility for providing law enforcement to. They were 12% of our population, but accounted for about 40% of our calls for service. So it indicated to us that there was a significant problem there that we were really not solving by throwing more cops at the problem. So we decided that would be an excellent place to start this pilot program.
You just made a phrase there, throwing more cops at the problem, and that has never really been the answer, has it, Mark?
Well, there's a base level of law enforcement that you have to provide,
granted.
But my own feeling and having the years of experience I do, just adding more cops does not solve the community or a crime problem.
2 reasons perhaps for that, Mark, from a layman's standpoint. The population increases, the number of wrongdoers seems to increase with the number of people, so to speak, and if you're going to add 2 more officers here, another team here, another team here, you're going to be adding teams to try to keep up with the population, and that's going to be very difficult to do.
Well, it is, Rich, and also we have, and we're good at arresting people. And my jail is full. In fact, we're having to add more space because we're good at arresting people. But we clog up the criminal justice system. The courts are full. There's not enough prosecutors. There's not enough public defenders. But we're really not solving the crime problem by addressing it that way. And what this community-oriented or neighborhood-oriented policing concept does is try to get to some of the root causes of those problems. And it doesn't solve them all. I mean, I'm not saying that COP is the be-all, end-all, but it addresses a certain part of the community problem. And there are still people that are going to have to be arrested, and we still go out and are aggressive in our enforcement efforts, but we also look at the root causes of those problems and how we can actually address those.
How has the community-oriented policing been accepted by the citizens in Roseland?
Very, very well. It has far exceeded any expectation that I had for the program. And that's one of the things that's been very, very gratifying to me. I constantly get letters complimenting the officers and the community. One of the things that I found interesting, I go out in the community a lot, community meetings, and I had different community people talk about this program and really how good it was, because when the officers drove through the neighborhoods, the officers were waving to people that were out working in their yards. And then the interesting part was the officers were saying that, you know, this is really a great program, because when I drive through neighborhoods, people wave to me. So there really was that sense of a community law enforcement partnership.
That's great. That's great to hear that so far. What have been some of the community activities that have been developed as an outgrowth of your implementation of the Roseland Community-Oriented Policing Program?
Well, I think first of all I need to say that, you know, we only provided, I think, a catalyst for the community,
Okay.
to get programs started. But some of the most notable, I think, and I can't take responsibility for all of those, but we have been a part of them, and that is we have established a youth program where we went to the business people, got funding for after-school programs. We were able to get the schools to donate their facilities and some volunteer staff time. So for 2 summers now, we have provided summer recreational activities for the youth in the area. Also,
That's great, Mark. Let me stop you just a minute there. That's great, because the more we can occupy these young minds and young people, that
Absolutely.
if left to their own devices, many cases will find ways to get into grief. I think all of us did when we were young, and that's certainly amplified today. So I commend you very much on that right there.
Well, thank you. There are a couple other things that I think are really notable. One is the 2 of my employees determined that there was really no youth sports activity, and especially for the Hispanic youth. So they went and personally contacted Hispanic youth in the school system, and were able to put together soccer teams. The last count, I believe, they had 75 youth involved in soccer activities. The community has established a parade and festival every year in the Roseland area. And I've gotten to participate in that, and it's really kind of a fun local event. And the other thing, we had one area down there that was particularly notable, especially in law enforcement communities, for being a very undesirable area. And over the 2.5, 3 years now that program has been in place, these people have really taken back their neighborhood, and recently got together a group of the community people. They've gone beyond the traditional neighborhood watch program, but they're out planting trees, they're doing landscaping, and they've really become a very tight-knit community. And I believe a lot of that has to do with just a sense of empowerment that now they've been able to take back their area.
I absolutely agree with you, and I think that the answer to a lot of the problems, as I see it once again from the standpoint of a layman, is that we reestablish pride in the neighborhood on the part of the people.
Absolutely.
And that in turn leads them to do a whole lot of things. They start disciplining their own, so to speak, and they start really taking pride in it, and they won't have any more of this defacement and what have you. And it's really amazing and wonderful to see people do that. So Roseland, I think, is a great example of what you've done right there. Have you observed, well, this is what we're just talking about. Have you observed an increased pride in Roseland since the COP program started there?
Very much so. And I think it's just a lot of people's perceptions that the community is a lot better place to live. And there has been a real increase in pride. And people, especially in conversations I have with people, where in the past they have said, you know, I'm kind of from Roseland, and said it almost apologetically. There's just really a sense of, I'm from Roseland, and these are the things that we're doing in our community.
Yeah, that's really a difference.
It
Instead
really
of saying, I'm ashamed to say I'm from there, and taking pride. That's what I was thinking there. What do you attribute this to?
Again, I think a lot of it has to do with the community wellness, and there's
Okay.
there's an old adage in law enforcement, or it's a thing called broken windows, and the principle is that if a window gets broken out of a house and it's not fixed, then additional windows will get broken. And if the window is fixed, then it says to the community, we don't tolerate that. And I think that principle a lot had applied in Roseland, where over the years things had become in a state of disrepair, not only physically but the mental attitude of the community. And I think that's turned around, where the community in that area has said, we're not going to tolerate that in our community anymore. We're proud of where we live. And I think you've seen an increase in the physical appearance down there as well.
Pride in yourself, in your home, in your family, in your neighborhood is one of the greatest and strongest solutions to any problem that you encounter with defacement and that sort of thing. Another thing here, what are some of the unique programs that have been developed by your staff in this Roseland community-oriented policing program? I mean, unique ones.
Well, we've done some neat things as far as our enforcement efforts, by foot patrols, bicycle patrols. We put officers out in the community on bicycles, and that has been real successful, both from an enforcement standpoint and just from a community standpoint, where the kids in the community and even the adults feel that they can come up and talk to the officer because they don't have the barrier of the patrol car there. We have done things, as I indicated before, with the youth programs. We have a juvenile diversion program in the area. We have a graffiti removal program, which actually is countywide, and I know Post Newsweek Cable has been very, very helpful in assisting us in that effort.
Great.
We have drug-free zones, and that was the Roseland area was the first place where we established a drug-free zone, and there's a law that allows us to provide an enhanced penalty for anyone who sells drugs within 1,000 feet of a place where children congregate. So we got a resolution from the school district and a resolution from the Board of Supervisors and established a drug-free zone in the Roseland area. That's since gone to other areas of the county.
That's a real hallmark of the program right there.
Yeah. So it's really become a partnership with the community.
Yeah. All right. Now, one final question before we take a break here. How well was the COP, community-oriented policing concept, accepted by your staff? You mentioned a little earlier that they kind of got the feeling, hey, this is a good program, but what else?
Well, I think at the onset, there was a little bit of apprehension. I mean, there was some excitement, and what we did was ask for volunteers to participate in this program. And then we interviewed the volunteers and selected the officers for the program. But everybody was there because that's where they wanted to be. Right. And one of the things that I did, which I think was particularly successful, was stay out of it. I actually gave them 3 parameters. I said, you have a constraint, a legal constraint, because I don't want you doing things that are illegal. You have a financial constraint, because we can't just give you, all of the resources we have. And the last constraint is your imagination. And I want you to go down there and I want you to establish a program. And the officers and the supervisor at the time were the ones that really put that program together. And working with the community, they found out what the community needed. It's just been overwhelming. And now we have people on waiting lists wanting to get transferred to the Roseland assignment.
That's great. We're talking to Sonoma County Sheriff Mark Eide. And we're talking about the community-oriented policing program in the Roseland area. And we're going to talk more about that because there's a lot more interesting information that he's going to impart with us. But first, let's pause for this important message.
The graffiti removal project was something that was in response to what we saw as a growing need for a project to eliminate graffiti around the county. We were successful to date in receiving over 2,000 gallons of paint to cover graffiti throughout Sonoma County. Post Newsweek Cable was very gracious in donating a pickup, which we use not only for transporting our personnel and equipment to the scenes, but also becomes a very high visibility tool to show people in the community how important the graffiti removal effort is.
Children are the largest group of Americans living below the poverty line. They have to reach higher for what others take for granted. Health care, balanced meals, encouragement to learn. But with help early on, children in your community can gain the skills to get out from below the poverty line. It takes programs like Success by Six and people like you to help them take the first step. Call to learn more. Change the world of a child, and you change the world.
Welcome back to this edition of Sonoma County in the 90s. We're talking with our Sonoma County Sheriff, Mark Eide, who has been our sheriff for the past 3 years, done a splendid job. And I say that for the simple reason, as I mentioned to Mark earlier in the program, you know you're doing a pretty good job when the public does not complain. Things keep going on and keep being done, and no one seems to take any umbrage. Now, some people say that's lethargy. Not when it comes to law enforcement. If there are any problems, they're going to hear about them. And it is true, and it's to their credit that they've heard about very few since they've been in office. So I commend you and your staff for that, Mark, for sure.
I do have a good staff.
You do indeed.
A great job.
You got a great bunch of people over there. As I understand the community-oriented policing program we're talking about, which is in Roseland area, the solutions include involving other government agencies, nonprofit agencies, citizens. Is this all correct?
It is. The amount of public resources or groups that can get involved in the community-oriented concept is really unlimited. We use zoning, planning, public health, adult and child protective services, county probation, fire departments, tow companies, auto dismantlers, you name it, and
really?
And there's an application for it somewhere in the program.
Do you have an example where you involved a lot of these?
Well, there was one, it wasn't actually in the Roseland area, but it was in the West County. And we had a place in the West County where we repeatedly got complaints from neighbors because of abandoned cars, illegal houses, unlawful septic systems, public health problems, and a lot of theft. It was kind of a commune, and the community was concerned about a lot of theft. And we, with the help of the Ernie Carpenter, West County Supervisor, got a meeting together, and we included zoning, public health, the building department, fish and game. We got a number of different agencies involved, and actually took it as a multidisciplined approach to dealing with the problem. We got a search warrant for the place. We went there. They were given citations to take corrective action. We towed a number of abandoned cars, and it really had a very successful conclusion because we have not had the complaints from the neighbors as a result of that. And this is something that had been going on for years.
Once again, the proof positive that you're doing it right. You're not getting the complaints from the people who feel put upon. Now that it's been successful in Roseland, the community-oriented policing program, will you probably use it elsewhere?
Oh, absolutely. We're doing, right now actually, we are using the concept in the Sonoma Valley with our substation in the Boy Springs area, and also in Guerneville with the substation we have in that area. So it's something that right now we have the three programs going, and we are looking at expanding it to a county-wide effort.
You're providing contract law enforcement right at the present to the city now of Windsor. Are you implementing the community-oriented policing program there yet?
Yes, that is.
You are?
Absolutely.
Great.
That is one of the selling points when we talk to them about providing contract law enforcement. And we told them that we would replicate our Roseland program in their town, and that's exactly what we're doing, and having the same types of results.
Every community in the county is going to want to get involved in that quickly. You know, what is really great about this is you're talking about, as we said earlier, renewal of a neighborhood pride. The fact that they're proud of living there and they want it to be right, and they're going to do their darndest to make sure it is right with your help, with the direction of law enforcement. All right, now we talked about Roseland and then some of the other, let's think of Guerneville, Sonoma Valley, Windsor. What are your plans for the rest of the unincorporated area of the county?
Well, right now we're looking at a new concept of providing law enforcement county-wide. And it's a study that we're doing because we want to make sure that we do it right, or as right as we can. We're bound to make mistakes. But we right now have watch commanders that are around the clock. So we have watch commanders on duty 24 hours a day. And what we're looking at is the concept of area commanders, where we take those same number of personnel and we divide the county into geographic areas, where these watch commanders then would become responsible for a geographic area, so that with the deputies, the sergeants, and these lieutenants would have a responsibility for identifying the different communities' issues and addressing it with the community-oriented policing concept in those areas.
Kind of assistant sheriffs. You already have a very fine assistant sheriff, Dale Moore, but kind of an assistant sheriff. These guys they'll kind of serve as the chief of that particular area, right?
Right, exactly.
This is great too, because then people feel, although they know you're the elected Sonoma County Sheriff, they feel that they've got their own person right there that understands their community and is primarily concerned with it.
Well, and it gives the administrator, the lieutenant, an opportunity to spend more time in the community and really deal with a lot of those other community issues.
When do you think you would have this new community-oriented policing program in place, let's say, for the county?
Our target is mid to late 1994, and again,
That's not far.
No, it's really not, but it is a major departure from the way that we have provided services in the past. And I'm all for trying things, and we're bound to make mistakes when we try things. But I want to make sure that we have at least thought through all of the implications of this major change in service delivery. And I'm sure that it's something that we are going to try at least in some degree.
I'm going to ask you a question here next that I don't really agree with, but I'll ask what you think. Do you think the community-oriented policing concept is a new fad that'll be replaced by something else? And what I meant when I said I don't agree with it, I hope not. But go ahead. Do you think it will?
No. See, I think community-oriented policing is an old fad. I think that for a period of time, as I said, we got away from the community. Law enforcement, either by community design or by law enforcement design, we took ourselves as separate and apart from the community. And I think that what we need to do is get back to where we were, utilize the new technology, utilize all of the current resources that we have available to us, but be part of the community, because that's really who we are. I mean, it's not just a job. We are people who live and work in this community.
Well, I'm from the generation before yours, but I do remember I was born in Cincinnati, lived in Oakland before I came here when I was 10 or 12. But I do remember the cop on the beat, as we called him in those days, was somebody I really was very fond of and had great respect for and feared to some degree whenever I did anything wrong. But it was a good concept.
Yes.
And it was one of the strengths of America. And it seems to me that you're going back to that. This is what I'm saying. You're not retracting in time as far as wonderful advancements in technology and police protection work, but we're going back to the human concept of we're here, we're just as interested in the pride and the goodness of this area as you, the residents, are. Right. And we're here to help you keep it that way.
I want people to feel good about their contact with law enforcement. When a cop comes to your home and leaves, I want people to feel that it was a real positive contact.
Would this community-oriented policing program have application to government in general, do you think?
I think absolutely it would. There is, actually San Diego right now, San Diego County is using the community-oriented government philosophy. I think there are a multitude of government issues or expectations that the community has of government that really need to be addressed with that multidisciplined approach. And I think we have departmentalized too much in government over the years, and I think we really need to get back to government in general.
Okay. Thank you, my friend, for a very instructive visit.
Rich, as usual, it's a pleasure.
Really enjoyed it, yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest has been Mark Eide, our Sonoma County Sheriff, who has been our sheriff for the past 3 years and will be up for your approval the next year. I'll tell you one thing, he's done a very fine job the first 3 years. We've been talking about the community-oriented policing concept and how successful it's been in Roseland and how it's probably going to be applied elsewhere in the county. My name is Rich McGlinchey. The program is Sonoma County in the 90s. I'll be back with you next week with another member of the county government family or a related agency. Till then, good luck, good health to each and every one of you.